Keys to victory for the San Francisco 49ers hosting the Washington Commanders on Christmas Eve. What do the Niners have to do to win this football game? And were there some Pro Bowl snubs? 6 Pro Bowlers, but still some Niners might have gotten snubbed for those season accolades. All that and more coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock alongside Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Eric_Crocker. Thanks for making us your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional therapy done securely online, available to people worldwide, and they have a special offer for our listeners. Get 10% off your first month at BetterHelp.com/lockedon. Croc, live from the grandparents' house, I believe it is. I'm about to be traveling to my fam as well in Central California. So Croc and I will both be holding it down in the Central Valley of California for Christmas, except actually, Croc, just got the news that you're going to be actually heading to the stadium, to Levi's Stadium, actually, on Christmas Eve for the football game, right?
I will be, and I kind of reached out to Twitter and said, hey, it was actually my buddy. He needed some tickets, and the 49er faithful, man, they came in strong. And shout out to Miss Gay Leonard. I don't know how to say the other part of her name. Proud Brit out in California. She said, hey, Croc, got some tickets for you. Love the podcast. That was awesome. Some other people that really came on strong with, just really showing a lot of love. My guys, Cisco and Mike podcast. So make sure you guys listen to the Cisco and Mike podcast. And they were like, hey, here's a couple of tickets for you as well. Shout out to the faithful, man. Like, they show a lot of support and not just, just because 49er fans, man, but they love the podcast. So that lets us know that we're doing the right thing with this. We're doing the right thing with this. It's fun. It's fun.
Yeah. And, for the holidays, this is our last podcast before Christmas. And so I think we got to thank the listeners, all the listeners, we're talking about millions of listens and views on YouTube and downloaded on all the different apps. It's phenomenal to see how many people listen to this show, how popular our show is, seeing it climb up, the charts for podcasts with some heavy hitters out there. And that's awesome to see. Love the fan base, such a great fan base for the 49ers. So Merry Christmas, everybody out there. Hope you have a great holiday season. And we really appreciate all of you. Biggest news today in this one, if we're talking keys to victory, Croc, Chase Young, he's coming back. He's making his return. Torn ACL last year. Chase Young coming back, former number 2 overall pick for the Washington. Wait, was he number 1 or number 2?
Number 1. I don't think there was any way he was going to be the number 2 pick unless there was a quarterback in that class, which I don't think there was. Was he number 2? Maybe he was number 2.
I can't think of what year that was. Who was in the Chase Young draft? Why am I blanking on
I
that?
know now we gotta look it up.
I think he was number 2. Was that 20?
But so now if he was number 2, we have to find out why he was the number 2 overall pick.
2020, he was number 2. Why? That is crazy. Why can I not think of who the number 1 pick was that year?
I know.
Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow. Okay, yeah. Joe Burrow class, right?
Okay,
that was Burrow.
That class.
Young 2, and then it was Tua and Herbert 5 and 6.
Jeffrey Okudah was number 3.
3, right?
To the Detroit Lions. You had some offensive linemen go over the next few picks, and then I think there was C.J. Henderson, number 9 overall, and you had the number 5th pick was, I believe, Tua. 7th pick was Justin Herbert.
5 and 6. Yeah, Tua were 5 and 6 back to back that year, and Joe Burrow was 1.
Okay, 6th pick. Okay.
Chase Young was 2.
Okay, so that would make sense. There's a quarterback in the class, and Joe Burrow, I would assume, has really paid off for Cincinnati Bengals.
Oh, and Chase Young hasn't lived up to the billing yet for the Washington Commanders, but he's still, a crazy talented guy. He's a freak of nature, and those Ohio State DNs are freaks, and injuries have hurt him. Last year, basically, Washington, we thought it was going to be this monster defense, and it's kind of been a lot better this year, and they could be even better now because they haven't even had Chase Young yet. But when you look at this, and this is, not only is Chase Young coming back here, This is also already one of the biggest key matchups and the keys to victory for the 49ers. And the Niners offensive line has played so well this year and playing even better, I think, recently. McGlinchey's had a couple of back-to-back really good games as well for the 49ers. And you got to go against the best defensive line they've seen this year. Chase Young coming back at one end. We're talking about 4 first-round picks here. You've got Montez Sweat at the other end, first-round pick in 2019. You have the 2017 and 2018 first-round picks for the Commanders in Jonathan Allen at defensive tackle, one of the best defensive tackles in the league, and Daron Payne. So, I mean, you got 4 first-rounders up front for the Washington Commanders. They're trying to beat people the same way the 49ers beat people. They've got, I wanted to call it, for the Game of Thrones fans out there, the Battle of the Bastards at quarterbacks, when you got Taylor Heineke against Brock Purdy that nobody wanted on draft day, either one of these guys, and they've ended up putting themselves into position to be quarterbacking playoff teams this year. So this is a really interesting matchups against these two teams and the way they're built right now. And there's some playmakers on the offensive side of the ball, but really, Croc, I mean, the key to the victory here for the 49ers is I think the 49ers defense is really good. They should be able to limit somewhat, and we'll get to more of that later on that 49ers defense against the Washington Commanders offense, but they should be able to limit, from what we've seen, the Commanders from not, going crazy and scoring, more than 20 or so points. Probably fewer than that if I had to bet. So the Niners need to score on offense, right? And they're going up against the best defense we've seen. They've got to win that battle up front to be able to run the football, to be able to protect their quarterback, to be able to make the plays, get the hands and the balls at the hands of their playmakers. And you got to get Chase Young blocked. You got to get Jonathan Allen blocked. You got to get Daron Payne blocked. You got to get Montez Sweat blocked. And they have some rotational guys as well. Niners O-line against the Washington Commanders D-line. If the Niners O-line comes out of this game in good shape, I think that means the 49ers took home a dub.
Definitely a key matchup. And if you go back a couple years ago, 49ers, I believe in 2020, they played against the Washington Commanders. Back then, I think they were called something different. I don't know, football team or something. But the 49ers defense actually played extremely well that game. It was the offense that kind of let them down, led by Nick Mullins, if I'm not mistaken. 49ers, I think on the defense gave up like 8 points or something like that. But the offense gave up a fumble, right? The quarterback fumbled, and I want to say maybe it was Chase Young, picked it up, ran it back for a touchdown. And then Nick Mullins followed that up with a pick 6. And those plays alone were like a big deciding factor in that game with how it turned out. So I think, like, for me, it's, yes, protecting the quarterback, but making sure that he isn't under constant duress to where things like that happen. Again, one was a sack strip fumble, right? That can happen at any time in the pocket. And then the other one was a pick 6, where a lot of times when you see quarterbacks a little rushed, maybe because of a pass rush and their time clock starts to speed up, they can throw an uncharacteristic pass, and a team like the Washington Commanders are a team that could really take advantage of that. And that's what you don't want. So you talked about that matchup up front. I think that is going to be a really big one and hopefully in favor of the 49ers.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit yesterday with David Harrison of Locked On Commanders for our crossover pod, Croc, and I know you were traveling, you weren't here for that one, but getting pressure with 4 is so important for teams. And it's so important for the Washington Commanders because we've seen Brock Purdy play really well against the blitz. So if you can get home with 4, have that extra guy in coverage, not have to blitz and get pressure on the young quarterback, force him into some bad throws, some mistakes, trying to get him to do too much. And, we still haven't seen many of those rookie mistakes from Brock Purdy. If we see a few more of those and the defense is able to capitalize, able to catch it if Brock Purdy does throw the ball to him, that's sort of the recipe for this one is not only are you not scoring on offense, but you're allowing them to put themselves into position to either, pick 6, score on offense, scoop and score situations, or, putting the Niners defense in a bad spot where they're getting 3s or 6s for basically nothing. And so that's something you just can't do against any team. And that's definitely the worry here against the Washington Commanders and that sort of a defensive line.
And that's the biggest worry because offensively, the Washington Commanders aren't blowing anybody away with how they've performed week in and week out. They don't score a bunch of points. They have some legit weapons, and we'll talk about some of those receivers, but it's kind of been hit or miss. I mean, Terry McLaurin, he's one of the best young receivers in the National Football League, and you know what you're going to get from him, but there are some other guys that have big-time ability. Jahan Dotson just had his best game against the New York Giants, so maybe he's starting to come on, but he started the season extremely slow. Well, started fast with 2 touchdowns in the opening game, and then after that, it was very just kind of very pedestrian for a receiver that you took in the first round. So you want to make sure that he doesn't have the game he had last game against the New York Giants, where he went for over 100 yards, scored a touchdown. You don't want him to be as impactful from there. So I talked about 49ers protecting Brock Purdy and make sure that he's comfortable. And I'd say if you flip that around on the defensive line, continue to do what you do and move quarterbacks off of their spot and make Taylor Heinicke have to be the reason why the Washington Commanders win this game. And if you make him the reason, I don't think that he's capable of doing that.
Absolutely. Let's get more into that 49ers defense against the Washington Commanders offense, what they have to do there, what to look out for with that matchup on Saturday, Christmas Eve. And we'll talk Pro Bowl snubs as well next. Turo is the world's largest car-sharing marketplace. With Turo, you can book any car you want, wherever you want it, from a community of local hosts. For example, Croc could have found a Turo host that had a Hemi so he could travel across the country, get himself into California. Did you bring the Hemi, Croc?
I did.
Okay.
I should have went to Turo because the rental car prices are extremely high right now. Had to drive to Hemi. I should have went to Turo. Don't be Eric Crocker. Don't make that mistake.
Yeah, go to Turo. Forget about those boring rental cars. Find your drive at Turo.com. Browse a huge selection of vehicles for just about any occasion or budget across the United States, UK, Canada, Australia. Book a spacious SUV, minivan. You want to take the family. You want to find a Hemi. You want to find a classic luxury car, special event. You want to roll up in style at a birthday or a holiday, or just need an economy car, get from point A to point B. Maybe you want to test drive that new electric vehicle, see what those are all about, see if they fit your everyday lifestyle. And many Turo hosts can even deliver the car right to you. Every trip is backed by liability insurance. Terms, conditions, and exclusions apply. Forget boring rental cars and find your drive at Turo.com. And when you're driving, please don't drive under the influence. Did you know that driving high is considered driving under the influence? That's right. Driving under the influence of marijuana is against the law in every state, even states where marijuana is legal. That means driving high could get you a DUI. And if you think law enforcement officers can't tell when you're driving high, you're wrong. Your friends can tell, your coworkers can tell, even your parents can tell, everyone can tell. So what makes you think law enforcement officers aren't going to be able to tell if you're driving under the influence? It can slow your response time, can change how you perceive time and speed. So even if you think you're fine to drive when you're high, you're not, because the bottom line is if you feel different, you drive different. And driving high is driving under the influence. So remember, drive high, get a DUI. This message paid for by the NHTSA. All right, Croc, let's get into that matchup a little bit from that 49ers defense. And I fully expect the 49ers defense to come strong and do a number. And we talked about how Brock Purdy's done a pretty good job of taking care of the football. A couple throws you were like, but it hasn't really hurt the Niners too much. Taylor Heinicke, similar guy, not a big height, weight, speed guy, doesn't have a cannon arm, likes to get out of the pocket, can make some plays, but he has been more prone to making some mistakes, and that's what you want to do if you're the 49ers, force him into those mistakes and get some of those turnovers, because I think that's the big difference in this Niners defense this year versus some recent Niners Ds is they're getting turnovers a lot more. And this is a team that you can get some turnovers from. But Heinicke's also trying to get the ball out to his playmakers. And so I'm interested to hear your thoughts in covering receivers like McLaurin and Jahan Dotson.
The 49ers really over the last couple of years, regardless of who's out there on the back end, I think if you just kind of say names outside of Charvarius Ward, you kind of be a little worried, right? I mean, Emmanuel Mosley went healthy, but you're kind of worried with the matchups. And I'd say regardless of who's been out there for the 49ers, it has been to their advantage with how they performed on the back end, at least to a sense of it not really hurting the 49ers. So you want to definitely kind of continue that going. And when you look at a guy like Terry McLaurin, I'd say the biggest thing is don't give up the big play to him. If Terry McLaurin ends up with 10 catches for 95 yards, I think you can live for that, right? On paper, it looks crazy, but I'd say outside that, the 49ers do a really good job of limiting other receivers. You really want to make this team one-dimensional. So if you can take away the run game, right now, their leading guy is someone who got shot in the kneecap in the robbery, came back, so that's really cool to see him, obviously be healthy, be on the field, but they're depending on him week in and week out to be the guy that carries them. And the 49ers, they take away the run game and make teams one-dimensional. So can you limit the big plays from Terry McLaurin, and can you make some of the others have to beat you? I'm curious to see if Charvarius Ward follows Terry McLaurin around. We've seen Ward do some of that to limit some of the big plays from opposing receivers. Watch him do it against Seattle. I thought he did a tremendous job against DK Metcalf. But that's kind of probably one of the underrated storylines. You know, Charvarius Ward against Terry McLaurin, Scary Terry as they call him.
Scary Terry, yeah, he's got a lot of speed, really good player. Pro Bowl player is Terry McLaurin, so that's a fantastic matchup, and I hope they do. Just from viewership perspective, it'd be fun to see if Charvarius travels with Terry McLaurin, watching that battle like we watched with Charvarius Ward and DK Metcalf last week, and then a pretty good matchup of younger players, 5'10", but play bigger in Diamador Lenore against the rookie Jahan Dotson. And Jahan Dotson is so good at the catch point and bringing balls down, even though he's not the biggest guy. He's really athletic as well. But, man, Diamador Lenore has probably been one of the best surprises for the 49ers this season, too. You remember, I always talk about it, how crazy the NFL is, and you think you know something, you wait 6 months, and it turns it on its ear. Do you remember last year how it went with, okay, right out of the box, training camp, it was like, oh, Diamador Lenore came ready to play. He might, be a nice find for the 49ers in the 5th round. And then by the end of the year, he was gone. He was a note. It's like, where did Diamador Lenore go? And it was Ambry Thomas that was playing corner for the 49ers and into the playoffs. And then coming into the year, even before the 49ers signed Charvarius Ward, we were thinking, oh, man, maybe they're just going to roll with the rookie, right? The 3rd rounder in Ambry Thomas, who ended the season pretty well. And now you fast forward to this year, and Emmanuel Mosley gets hurt, and it's Diamador Lenore that's the one that's back out there. He's on the outside making plays. We thought he'd be in the slot. It's Jimmy Ward in the slot, and now Ambry Thomas is nowhere to be found. It's pretty wild how this has all gone, and Diamador Lenore has been holding it down over there since Emmanuel Mosley's been out.
He's been doing very well. And my expectations for a guy who came into the season as maybe the number 4 cornerback is don't be the reason the 49ers lose. Don't be the guy that teams are just able to consistently pick on. And I'd say to this point, he has done well. I can't think of a game off the top of my head where I'm just like, oh my goodness, Diamador Lenore, oh, they go at him again. Oh, it's 3rd down. They're targeting Diamador Lenore, right? Like there haven't been those moments, obviously, just like any corner in the league. And I think the 49ers, especially the fan base, the expectations are so high playing and play out because the team consistently plays so well. But cornerbacks, they're going to get beat here and there, right? Show me a corner that doesn't get beat, and I'll show you a cornerback that sits on the sideline the entire game. I'd say knowing that and how hard it is to play the defensive position, there have been a couple of flags here and there, but for the most part, I think you can say, you know what, Diamador Lenore, he is doing a really good job of filling in, and should have had a pick 6 in the last game. It got overturned because of Nick Bosa tackling the quarterback too hard. But Diamador Lenore, man, he's been awesome. He's doing a really good job, and I couldn't ask for more from someone who came into the season as potentially your 4th or maybe even 5th corner.
No doubt. That's been phenomenal. I want to talk real quick before we get to the Pro Bowl portion of this podcast and maybe some the guys who made it and maybe some snubs for the 49ers here. So Croc, what, just from a perspective of in coverage, you're a former corner. When you're going up against guys, are you relying more on scheme or are you changing the way you play guys? Because DK Metcalf and Terry McLaurin, both fast players, but very different guys. Are you just like, okay, I'm going to rely on my scheme. I'm supposed to play off here. I'm playing the same amount off as I played against DK Metcalf. Are you playing more off against DK? Or you want to get up on DK more? Like, what is that like as a mindset for a cornerback? And what was it like for you? And what would that be like for a guy who's traveling with a player and you're facing different styles of players every single week?
If you are traveling with a guy, you obviously just always want to know what an offense likes to do. So first and foremost, the battle starts with the offensive coordinator. What are their tendencies? They're always going to go back to their tendencies and what they like to do on certain down and distances and different situations. So you can have some sort of an idea on what exactly it is that you're going to be getting from that receiver. But when you start to shadow guys and his man coverage, then you have to know a little bit more about that guy. And does he have any tells with how he runs routes? Are there some routes where you're like, hey, I don't have to worry about him running these, so I can already eliminate that out of my head? When you look at 2 receivers that are drastically different, like a Terry McLaurin and a DK Metcalf, who both, they are going to win with speed, but there's one guy that's a little bit more twitched up. Terry McLaurin, a guy who wasn't known as a pure route runner coming out of Ohio State, did a terrific job at his pro day and has kept that going in the league. And one of the better route runners, being able to free himself up. You know that you have to be ready for any sudden movements, especially at the top of routes, as opposed to DK Metcalf, who's going to win with more speed and power than more finesse at the top of routes. So different type of guys, you got to be ready for a different type of battle. And you got to be ready, especially with the Seahawks, the mental battle of DK Metcalf, who's going to bring it verbally as well. Don't think you have to worry about that as much as Terry McLaurin. So you might be a little bit more at ease and a little bit more comfortable, but understanding that, like, you know, with route running, I have to be more on my toes and play with a little bit more anticipation.
Yeah, Terry McLaurin's an interesting player because he's a really tough guy, but he's sort of like a silent assassin type versus DK Metcalf, who's a little bit more demonstrative, and especially against the 49ers. And you could see it a little bit more with him. And he's such a big guy anyway. He's going to try to beat you up. Terry McLaurin's really tough. And I like the way he, you know, earlier on in his career and in college, he's like all about special teams. And, you know, he's just like a hard-nosed guy. But he's not the most demonstrative player like DK Metcalf is. But I really like Terry McLaurin, probably one of the more underrated players in the league. So it's going to be fun watching them, and hopefully Charvarius Ward and Deommodore Lenoir can do a number on these guys and maybe get some turnovers, and the 49ers D can keep doing what they've been doing. When we're talking about Charvarius Ward, though, Croc, not a Pro Bowler. Is he the biggest Pro Bowl snub, though? Let's talk about the Niners Pro Bowlers and the not 49ers Pro Bowlers next. Of course, you can bet on this game, Niners the Washington Commanders at the 49ers on Christmas Eve. All of the Christmas weekend games at betonline.net, your number one source for sports betting, information, stats, news, and analysis this season and every season. You got futures at BetOnline. You've got every weekly line, tons of props as well in the NFL. You can get all the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there too, not just pro football. College bowl season, NBA basketball, college basketball. You've got it all covered at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. Always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting information and your betting fix. Get over to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more at BetOnline, where the game starts. 49ers Pro Bowlers, Croc. And some of the names shouldn't be a surprise. Kyle Juszczyk. Does Kyle Juszczyk have the easiest path to the Pro Bowl in the NFL? Like, you're the best, you know, multi-talented fullback in the league. And then on top of that, there's only like 2 or 3 other guys you're even competing with to be in the Pro Bowl every year. And you get to play in Kyle Shanahan's offense and be utilized as an OW. So shouldn't be much of a surprise at all that Kyle Juszczyk made his, I believe it's 7th Pro Bowl now this year. Looking at the rest of the Pro Bowlers.
And I believe all 7 in a row.
Yeah, every year with the 49ers, he's been in the Pro Bowl. I know that. And I'm not sure if it was his last year that he made the Pro Bowl because he's been with the Niners 6 years, right? Yeah, 6 years, 6 seasons. So, yeah, that's pretty amazing for Kyle Juszczyk. Congratulations, Talanoa Hufanga, his first Pro Bowl. I wasn't sure if he was going to, because a lot of times guys get those sort of accolades kind of a year too late. You know, they get recognized. You have to build up your brand a little bit, and then people recognize you later. It's pretty amazing how the league has recognized Talanoa Hufanga already, and he got his first Pro Bowl bid in his first season as a starting safety for the 49ers. No surprise, Nick Bosa, Defensive Player of the Year. His 3rd Pro Bowl appearance. George Kittle gets his 4th Pro Bowl appearance, and Trent Williams his 10th Pro Bowl appearance. But I think the biggest story with 49ers Pro Bowlers.
Wait, Peacock. Did you say George Kittle?
George Kittle, yeah. George Kittle, his 4th Pro Bowl appearance. So 6 for the Niners. Hufanga, Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, George Kittle, Kyle Juszczyk, and Trent Williams.
George Kittle might be one of the more surprising ones. Unless there just aren't a lot of, you know, productive tight ends around the league. And maybe there's some of that, but I'd say it's been a little underwhelming. I mean, his touchdowns are up, and that's awesome. But I'd say just, you know, from what you would expect from him. And again, I think in my head, George Kittle year in and year out is that 1,300-yard receiver that I saw a few years back. And he's kind of like far removed from that. Now, I know that's not all to George Kittle, right? Like tremendous in the run blocking game. So if you're telling me he's making the Pro Bowl, almost like a special teams player that's a really good gunner, right? Where it's like, it doesn't seem that important, but clearly the NFL, they're like, no, that is an important job. And if you look at George Kittle, it's like, well, no, he doesn't have the receiving yards, but he's extremely good in the blocking game. Maybe that's it, but a little underwhelming as a pass catcher, which would you think would be kind of the easier path as a tight end.
Yeah, his targets are definitely lower than they have been, especially in his record-setting season. But I think it's kind of the opposite of what I just talked about with Hufanga, where he's got the brand. So, like you already know George Kittle is great. And even if he's not getting the targets, you recognize he's one of the best tight ends in the league. And I think that's why, he's going to get voted in, even if his numbers aren't in a place where they could be, because, if he got a bigger target share, his numbers would be in the receiving game there. You know how good of a blocker he is. So, he's impacting plays anyway. But yeah, the Pro Bowl voting has always been very much brand recognition. I think George Kittle has that. So a player has to really go over the top of him production wise that doesn't have the George Kittle, wow factor. He's a dude. He's a top billing player in the NFL, and everyone knows who George Kittle is. Everyone knows his face. Everyone knows. He's such a fun player. I think it's easy to like George Kittle, even if you're not a 49ers fan.
Yeah, I think that the tight end for the Dallas Cowboys, Dalton Schultz, his numbers, last I checked, because I'm in group chat with my brother and some of my homies, got some Cowboy fans in there.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey, Schultz numbers are just as good as George Kittle's. And I think we would say, well, is he as good of a blocker? And the Cowboys actually run the ball extremely well. He's not going to have that reputation, talking about Schultz, but maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But the name recognition is not nearly what it is for George Kittle, who is kind of the brand ambassador of the NFL at the tight end position.
And look, Dalton Schultz is a nice player, probably a pretty underrated player around the league, but come on, he's no George Kittle. So you can tell your brother that. So a couple of notes here. These from Matt Barrows. 6 Pro Bowlers, one more than in 2021 when Bosa, Juszczyk, Kittle, Debo, and Trent Williams were selected with 5. San Francisco's top-ranked defense had 3 members, but Dre Greenlaw, who's come on strong recently, did not make it as a first-teamer or an alternate. The 49ers did have a ton of alternates, though. So my question to you, Croc, is who's the biggest snub in the Pro Bowl from the 49ers? And maybe this is the biggest snub in the entire conference with Dre Greenlaw, Christian McCaffrey, and Charvarius Ward. All 2 of those guys, McCaffrey and Ward, are alternates at least. And I just had a bunch of alternates too, and I was kind of surprised by some of those names. Jake Brendel, the entire specialist group, Robbie Gould, Ray McLeod, Mitch Wishnowsky, and Tibor Pepper actually is a huge snub here because he was number 2 in fan voting for long snappers. And he
friend of the podcast.
And friend of the podcast. Love me some Tabor Pepper. Great dude. And he's a really good long snapper. He did not make it. So that's my number 1 snub. But Dre Greenlaw, not even an alternate. And I'm not surprised. We talked about this before. I was like, well, he's probably not going to make it just because Fred Warner and, is like, are the Niners going to get, is the Niners whole team going to make it on there? So I guess I'm not super surprised, but I think the biggest snub's clearly Dre Greenlaw, not even being an alternate. And then Christian McCaffrey, I thought was going to be a shoe-in because, again, his brand and what he's done with the 49ers and national shows. Everyone's talking about the Niners and the trade and Christian McCaffrey. I'm surprised he did not make it. And Charvarius Ward is just, I think it's tough for corners sometimes as much as any position to build that brand recognition and people say, hey, Charvarius Ward, one of the best corners in the NFL, which I think he is.
I'd say out of all those guys, I'm surprised for different reasons for each one and why they're snubbed. Say Dre Greenlaw shouldn't be the biggest one because I don't think he has the name recognition as some of the guys. And when we talk about this, Charvarius Ward, we talk about him a lot and what he's doing. Listen, it took us into this point to mention Dre Greenlaw. So the fans, they took note of it. They try to vote him in. McCaffrey, we understand that. But Greenlaw, man, what he has meant to this defense and how good he has been. And anytime you watch the 49ers, I'd say it is extremely difficult to not notice number 57. Like, it is you have to just kind of really close your eyes and watch the game on mute. So now you're not even paying attention to the game. That's the only way to not realize what 57 is doing out there. He's making plays. He's scoring touchdowns. He's flying around. He's taking great angles on guys like Tyreek Hill in big moments. I mean, he has been really good. And early on, didn't start off that well, right? Remember the Bears game? There was some things where I think a lot of people thought it was maybe Talanoa Hufanga with blown coverages. I think Greenlaw, between that, he had a bad face mask. He had some bad penalties and missed assignments. But since then, he has been lights out and one of the better players on a terrific defense for the San Francisco 49ers. Clearly, you can hear the passion in my voice when I watch him. I think he's an extremely underrated linebacker in this league. The fact that he's not even an alternate, I think that's a little ridiculous.
Yeah, he's been banged up a little bit, and really with the Pro Bowl voting, and first of all, there's a month to play practically in the regular season. Why would they stop voting? Vote when the season's over, right? So this is very much a first half of the season award because you open up the Pro Bowl voting and people are going to vote for the guys that have already done all the stuff. And I think Dre Greenlaw just has gotten better and better as the season has gone on. So I think that's another big reason. This is like the Pro Bowl voting, when they stop it and when they start the voting, it's almost like a first half of the season type of award. So I think that hurts Dre Greenlaw as well.
Yeah, and they're not even playing the game. So why not wait until like the last, really, like that should be like the last week of the season, you announce the Pro Bowlers, and then in the offseason, obviously you do or late in the year, Super Bowl, around the Super Bowl, whatever, you do the all pro team. But Pro Bowl should not even be announced until like week 18. Let's announce it then.
Right. And give people longer to vote on some of these things. Can they bring back the other thing is, why do you need alternates if they're not going to have a game? Because that was why so many guys, you'd have this massive Pro Bowl team because half the guys, or probably more than half in some cases, wouldn't show up to the Pro Bowl. So they'd have to have other guys come in and be in the Pro Bowl. So you don't even need alternates anymore if you're not going to play the game. That's one thing I'm asking. The other thing I'm asking is, can we bring back the skills competition if you're not going to have a Pro Bowl game? I want to see Darrell Green against Herschel Walker running a 40-yard dash against each other. Like, that was fun. Can we bring some of those things back?
Yeah, so that one was like a summertime thing, and I think with the Pro Bowl they got rid of, like, because they did have the flag football game some years ago. They used to have flag football, and I guess somebody like tore their ACL in it, and that's when they're like, oh, all right, let's do away with that. We're still gonna play tackle football in this game. We're gonna do away with the flag football.
They had the beach football. Remember, it was Robert Edwards. Was that his name? He was a rookie. He was like rookie of the year for the Patriots at running back, and then tore his ACL playing beach football. He had a really bad injury on the beach.
I mean, but if you're going to cancel anything, cancel the actual game. The beach stuff is fun to watch.
The game is terrible. It's god awful. Like, I can't imagine people are tuning in and watching that thing anyway.
I think anytime you're doing any activity like that, you open the door for some type of injury. So if you're going to get rid of anything, just get rid of the actual football game, and if you want, get rid of the beach flag football, which was fun. You got to see like the all timers in it a lot as well.
Yeah.
But they still have some of the other skills competitions, the throwing, trying to hit the targets. Yeah. I feel like they did some of that last year.
I want to see who has the strongest arm, who can throw it the furthest. I want to see who's got like the biggest arm, who throws the ball just the furthest. Accuracy stuff's good too, but I want to see who the fastest man is too. Like, I want to see Tyreek Hill race Raheem Mostert or whatever. Like, I want to see those kind of things.
I was going to ask you who's the fastest.
Yeah, Tyreek Hill would be for sure the guy at the top of the list. I think he would be the betting favorite. You'd have to have guys like, obviously, Raheem Mostert in there. Jamar Chase, I think, would be in the conversation. There's some of those DBs that are like gunners on special teams that aren't great players, but that, were track guys in college and are super fast. I'm trying to think. I think I'm missing one.
Yeah, there are some guys that have speed, and I think once they're in the NFL, you don't care so much about the 40-yard dash, but there are guys that ran some legit 40s that just don't have as much impact as maybe people expected. But if you just lined them up and said, hey, you got a 50-yard sprint or 100-meter sprint, they get off on some guys and potentially win.
Yeah, 100-meter would be a lot different. All right, DK Metcalf's another one. He tried to do the Olympic trials last year.
He ran 10.3. That's pretty damn good.
It's damn good. That would be fun to see DK Metcalf. He's so damn big, too, running against some of these littler guys. Anyway, all right, we got to get out of here. Croc, any predictions here before we go for Christmas Eve?
49ers win, man. They're dominating right now. They're playing their best football. I got buddies in the group chats. They keep saying, oh, well, this and that. Dude, you guys keep talking about a week 1 loss and a loss to Atlanta Falcons. That feels like it was a season ago. The 49ers are on a 7-game winning streak right now. They're playing extremely well at offense, defense, special teams. Early on, special teams wasn't great. The special teams is playing well right now. I mean, this is just an extremely difficult team to play. They're playing at home. I expect the 49ers to win in dominant fashion.
There you go. Dominant Christmas Eve win for the 49ers over the Washington Commanders, and Croc and I will have it all broken down for you right here. Locked On 49ers.